Hello, and welcome to episode 3 of The Red Thread with me, Catrice Horsley. They were supposed to come out every week, but I've been away. And what I'm going to do today is record 4 of them. So the whole 6 will be able to go out weekly. What a genius I am. Why didn't I think of that earlier? So, for those of you who have just jumped in on this episode, the red thread is a phrase that's used in Sweden, which is the country that I live in, to kind of explain the pattern through something that makes sense of it. So, quite often, if there's a conference here in Sweden, people will say, well, what's the red thread that goes through it? What's the thing that connects everything? And I'm using the phrase as a way of talking about our identities, the stories we believe about ourselves, our core narratives. And quite often, many of us have this very strong core narrative without realizing it. And it impacts on our behavior and it impacts on the way we relate to other people. So that's what this little series, The Red Thread, is all about. So before we kick off with episode 3, I need to tell you the little wee beastie, my little dog, is down here. So I might get a little bit disturbed, or you might hear some strange noises. Um, so today's episode is all about boundaries. And I talked in the previous episode about how often, if we don't value ourselves, we will put other people and other people's needs ahead of ours, and then we can get kind of resentful. I am a brilliant resenter. And one of the reasons for that is because I don't have very strong boundaries, or I haven't in the past had very strong boundaries. And again, like I said earlier in one of the previous episodes, for me as a woman, that is definitely linked into the stories I've been told about what it is to be a woman and how to be a perfect mother. You sacrifice yourself, you put your children's needs in front of your own, and you never say no to people. You need to be kind and nice and help others. And what this has developed in me is the most magnificent resentful mutter. So I can literally say, no, that's no problem. That's fine, with that slightly raised eyebrows and slightly higher voice. No, it's fine. It's absolutely fine. And then I walk away and I'm like, but I actually won't have the uncomfortable conversation and say, no, it's not fine. I don't want to do that. Um, and I am starting to have the uncomfortable conversations now. And they're really, really uncomfy for me. For some people, they might not be. But many of the women, particularly, and I know there's men out there who experience the same. It is easier to say yes and not rock the boat, but then you do carry this resentment and you kind of let the person who's put you in that position know that you're annoyed with them without actually saying why. Now, I have actually followed that back through into another behavior that I have that is linked into my core values. And I think every core value that we have, the thing that the very strong belief we have about, everybody needs to be more responsible, or everybody needs to be kinder, or everybody needs to be more truthful. And we rate these things very highly. These are our core values. Every core value that we have, if it's taken to its extreme, has a slightly negative side, or possibly a very negative side. So one of my core values, one of my strongest core values, is I want to be kind, which might even be linked into I want people to like me and I want to please people. I'm a people pleaser, or I used to be. And again, that came from the stories about when I was young about what it was to be a good girl. And a good girl was one who said, yes, it's no problem, I will do that, or yes, I'll be quiet, or yes, I'll be neat, or yes, I'll be this, but basically adapt and compromise yourself, repress, compress, and depress yourself into other people's expectations of what you should be, rather than being connected to that internal sense of your identity. So, this thing about kindness meant that I would lie to people rather than be truthful, because if I was truthful, then I would upset them. And I didn't want to upset them because I wanted to be kind. And linked into all of that, I would meta narrate why I was doing it. And what do I mean by meta narrate? I've got such an ego. By that, I mean, I would say to myself in my head, well, I won't say that because, he's going to get really upset about it. And then he's going to do this and then he'll be hurt. And then that will link into this other stuff that he carries. And so I'm not going to do it. So I was making up a story, meta narrating about how this person would react if I told them the truth, like I knew, like I didn't even trust them with the truth. I didn't even give my children, previous partners, the chance or the trust that they could handle the truth. I kept them safe because I believed I knew how they would react. So there's a lot of stuff tied into that. And it's very, very hard to untangle all of those threads. But one of the techniques that I have found that is really, really useful, I'm going to share with you, and it's from a fantastic book, and I'm going to put the details in the comments below in the description for this little video. So before I share that, one of the things I really feel is very hard, but we have to do in order to follow our red thread, in order to honor who we are, value who we are, and what we do, is we have to have these very firm boundaries. And we have to be able to think to ourselves, yes, that's acceptable, or no, that is not acceptable. Yes, I feel comfortable with that, or no, it really makes me feel uncomfortable or stressed or anxious. And we need to be able to articulate that and trust that others can hear it. And it might be in the first instance of saying, no, I'm not prepared to do that, or no, I don't want to eat that, or no, that it's not my turn to do that. We have to know that people might react because we're saying no, whereas before we might have been pleasing them and pleasing them and pleasing them. So it'll be a bit of a shock. But the more you invest in the difficult conversations, the more you invest in your boundaries, the kinder you are, because you're not confusing people. So perhaps in the past, I would say, yeah, that's not a problem. And then I would be annoyed about it and be the muttering mistress of resentment. And then I might say the next time, no, I'm not going to do that. Or no, it's okay. And people just got confused about, is that okay? Are you doing that or are you not doing that? Because I wasn't clear. So it's really, really important that we put down our boundaries and we keep to our boundaries. And then it stops us being so resentful. It clears the air and people know where they stand with us and what is acceptable behavior and what isn't acceptable behavior. So one of the examples I'm going to give is people pleaser. When my husband and I used to go out in the boat with the dog, everything's about a boat and the dog in these examples that I give you. I would push off the boat and take the rope and get into the boat, which is all very new stuff for me, coming from Birmingham in England. There's not that many big lakes that you go on in boats. And then when we got to the place that we were going to tie the boat to, a little lake or something, or when we an island, or when we got back to where we moor the boat, I would get off the boat. I won't say jump because I've never jumped off the boat in my life. I kind of stumble off the boat. and tie the boat, but also I would be somehow trying to control the dog because my husband was kind of fixing the engine and stuff. And I would get really stressed. And then, like, if there was somebody where we were moored that had a dog, the dog would go crazy. And I was trying to tie the boat and I was trying to look after the dog, and I would just get really, really, really angry because I could only do one of those. I couldn't do both. And yet I was saying I could do both because I wasn't saying to my husband, you take the dog while I tie it up. Now it's fine. We've trained the dog to go back, sit next to my husband. I get off the boat, I tie the boat, and now the dog goes. But I would be so angry and resentful. And it's been the same with things like, say, if I wanted to really focus attention on one thing, and then I was invited to do something else, and I didn't want to displease those people. So I would say, yeah, I'll go and do that. But half the time that I was with the people, I was thinking about the stuff that I wasn't doing. So I wasn't really fully present with those people or enjoying myself or giving me that freedom. And then I would come to the end of the day and feel pissed that I hadn't achieved fully what I wanted to achieve in either of those areas because I hadn't had the strength to say no to one thing so that I could focus on the other. And many of us will be the people pleasers who say, oh yeah, I can do that. Oh yeah, I can do that. Oh yeah, I can do that. And end up doing three things at 33.3% rather than one thing at 100%, and then being annoyed with ourselves that we haven't done that one job properly, and being resentful of the fact that we were expected to. But there is a certain personal responsibility in saying, no, I can't. These are my boundaries. And actually saying to people, this is what you can have. I can say yes to all three and do them pretty shit, or I can say yes to one and do it brilliantly. What would you prefer me to do? So it doesn't have to be a huge argument, but I think we are beholden to take responsibility for our boundaries, and also we can explain to people why they are in place. Very confusing, a lot of stuff tied up. So let me now share this great little exercise. It looks like I printed off these things in a really interesting way, but it's actually because my printer is running out of ink. So here's the book the exercises come from. It's called Narrative Coaching, and it's by David B. Drake, PhD. And you can see that I do use this quite a bit. It is for coaches, but I find it useful as well in reflecting on my own life, and it gives me a lens to look at certain narratives that I carry that is different to my usual lens. So it's altering my perspective about myself. So it's all about changing behavior, but breaking it down systematically. So the first thing it asks you to do, you can see what I mean about my printer, is it asks you to think of an experience you had that wasn't absolutely brilliant, that didn't go in quite the way you wanted it to go, perhaps. And to describe it as though you are observing it in third person. So rather than me saying to myself, I was really annoyed because I had to look after the dog, and no, not that, but she was on the boat. She was trying to hold the dog in one hand. She was trying to tie up the boat with the other hand. The dog was pulling towards another dog. Her face went red. She started to yank the dog back, blah, 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 blah. So you're doing it as though it's third person. So that's the first thing you do. The second thing is, what were you telling yourself at the time? So I was telling myself, possibly at that time, that life wasn't bloody fair. I can't do these things. Goddamn dog, goddamn this, goddamn that. I couldn't do this, was the main thing that I was saying to myself. What does that say about how you see yourself? I put myself in position where I just take on too much. Why did I say yes to both? I can't say no. I can't say no. I can't say this is not acceptable. I can't do this. What did I do as a result of this? I got really peeved and annoyed with my husband. Oops. And then what happened at the end? He was angry, I was angry, and the dog was pissed. It wasn't brilliant. Then what David B. Drake, PhD, says you should do is you reverse that. And you start with what you would have wanted the outcome to have been. So what would I have liked to have happened? I would have liked for it to have all been a little bit more peaceful, and that I could achieve the things that I was expected to achieve. What could I have done differently? I could have asked my husband to take the dog while I jumped off the boat and tied up the boat. What do I need to shift in how I see myself? I don't have to be the one who does everything. I can ask people to help me, or I can say, this is not acceptable because I can't do it by myself. So we have to find another way forward. I can have boundaries. What can I say to myself next time? Catrice, just say that you can't do it and say that you're not willing to do it. And what would I observe if this was the case? I would be so much calmer. I would tie up the boat peacefully, and then the dog will run towards me with joy in his heart and be perfectly behaved, and my husband will be happy, and I would be happy, and the dog would be happy. The end. So I hope that is helpful, and I hope that technique, the changing behaviours technique from the narrative coaching book, is as useful to you as it is to me. The book also discusses this idea of the old stories that we carry and the new stories that we want to inhabit, and goes through this idea of how we pivot between the two. So it's a very useful book. I'd highly recommend it. It is a bit directed at coaches, people who coach, rather than us people who perhaps need the coaching. But it's very, very useful to go through. So I highly recommend it. So I hope that was useful. And the next episode, which I'm going to record straight after this, I'll be in the same clothing, is going to be all about identifying, as we follow our red thread towards this imagined future that we want to create, how do we identify the demons in the story, the monsters who might sabotage us or attack us? And how do we identify the helpers? And how do we work with both of those? So that'll be the next one. That'll be out next week. And I hope you are finding them helpful. Please subscribe to the channel and please leave me some comments about what has been the most useful episode for you, because I am designing in September a course all based on the red thread, and also there is an Instagram page all about the red thread with some helpful tips and advice too. So search for that, and I think the link for that is also on the descriptions underneath the first video, but I'll put them underneath this one too. So have a good day, enjoy yourself, and make sure you follow